6:31. So I'm going to go ahead and start, and then when Lori starts speaking, I'll switch it to speaker view. But I wanted everybody to see her book. She writes 2 textbooks, and this is one of them on nutrition. And these are used at the college level. She has her undergraduate degree from Cornell, and she has her PhD from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. And she's been writing these 2 nutritional textbooks for decades, right, Lori?
Yeah, like 30 years.
Whoa.
So she's going to speak for about 45 minutes, and there should be plenty of time for questions after that. So thank you so much for joining us, Lori.
Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I don't have a huge PowerPoint presentation, but I have some visuals that might be helpful. So let me get that set up here too. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about today is choosing a healthy dietary pattern. And before we start to get into actual food choices, I wanted to remind everybody that, that your health and your risk of disease is determined by more than just your diet. It's also determined by the genes you inherit, other lifestyle factors such as the amount of exercise you get, as well as the environment in which you live. So, and I'm going to be talking about the recommendations, which do tell us to eat a plant-based dietary pattern. And I use the term dietary pattern because that's now what we say when we refer to the combination of foods and beverages that make up our intake over time. I think when we use the word diet, people think of like weight loss diets, so you go on again, off again. This is over time, all of our intake from foods and beverages. Recommendations, as I said, are to eat a plant-based dietary pattern, both for our health and for the environment. Plant-based dietary patterns are associated with health benefits, which I'm sure Claire already discussed, but they are associated with lower body weights, with a reduced risk of obesity, and a reduced risk of other nutrition-related chronic conditions such as heart disease, diabetes, high blood pressure, certain types of cancer. The lower body weight, one of the factors that contributes to this is the fact that if you are choosing a healthy plant-based diet, you have what we call a low-calorie density. So in other words, you eat more food per calorie. And this is just an example. This is 100 calories of spinach, which is about over 6 cups of spinach, versus 100 calories of Dorito chips, which is only 8. So you can imagine you're going to be a lot more full after the 6 cups of spinach. The lower incidence of other nutrition-related chronic diseases is partly due to the fact that body weights are lower, which reduces risk. It's also due to the fact that a plant-based diet is lower in certain nutrients, such as saturated fat, that often have a negative impact on our health. And it's also higher in whole grains, legumes, nuts, vegetables, fruits, which add fiber, vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, and phytochemicals, which are beneficial for our health. When we use the term phytochemical, phyto means plant. So we're talking about plant chemicals, and the term is used to refer to those that have a positive impact, have some health benefits, even though phytochemicals are not nutrients. They're not required for life. Okay. So going back to the fact that diet is not the only factor that affects our health, eating a plant-based diet does not mean that you'll never be overweight or have high blood pressure or diabetes or any of these other conditions. But if you do inherit a predisposition for these things, if you do eat a healthy plant-based diet, it will reduce the risk that you will get these diseases. And if you do, it will delay the onset and reduce the severity and make them easier to manage. So there are many types of what we call plant-based diets. This table at the top, which is calling it non-vegetarian, I'm calling this non-plant-based because there's healthy portions of red meat, poultry, fish, dairy, and eggs. Semi-vegetarian is what is primarily recommended that most Americans shift to reduce their intake of red meat, poultry, fish, and dairy products. So they eat more plants and fewer animal products. And then there are a variety of diets that eliminate various things. Pescetarian excludes animal flesh except fish. Some pescetarian diets include dairy and eggs, some don't. Lacto-ovo-vegetarian excludes animal flesh, but includes eggs and dairy. Lacto-vegetarian excludes animal flesh and eggs, but includes dairy. And ovo-vegetarian does the opposite. It includes eggs, but not dairy. And vegan, which excludes all animal foods. And this is what I'm going to focus on today, are vegan diets. And I'm going to focus on it strictly from a nutritional point, not from a moral or ethical point. Dietary patterns should be flexible, not rigid. So from a health standpoint, if you're trying to be on a vegan diet and all of a sudden you're in a restaurant and you're halfway through your meal and you realize that it's got some cheese in it or something, it's not going to have an impact on your health unless you're doing it all the time. And the reality is you can do more damage with a poorly chosen vegan diet than you can from an occasional sprinkle of Parmesan cheese. So, poor plant-based choices can lead to nutrient deficiencies and can lead to a pattern that could be high in added sugar, salt, highly processed carbohydrates, or calories. So I'm going to start by focusing on the risk of nutrient deficiencies and looking at the nutrients that could be at risk in a vegan diet if you're not making healthy choices. So we can call these nutrients of concern. And one that usually pops up right away when somebody thinks about eliminating meat and dairy products is protein. Can I get enough protein consuming a vegan diet? And we can answer that question right away before we talk about anything else. The answer is yes, there's no problem getting enough protein from a vegan diet. But I want to dive a little deeper into it and look at what the recommendations are and where you're getting that protein in a plant-based diet. So the RDA, or recommended dietary allowance for protein, is 0.8 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. Or we can convert that into pounds, about 0.4 grams of protein per pound. So a 150-pound person would then need about 60 grams of protein. For perspective, a chicken breast, 3-ounce chicken breast, which is about the size of a deck of cards, has 25 grams of protein. So if you're eating animal protein, 2 chicken breasts just about does it. And I also want to point out that the RDA, the recommended dietary allowance, is an amount that meets the needs of 97 to 98% of people in the population. So it's a high number. Not everybody needs that much, but that much will meet the needs of almost everybody. Typical American diet that includes animal products has way more protein than we need. Adult males in the US consume almost 100 grams of protein. Adult females, about 73 grams of protein. If we look at older adults, which most of us are, there are a few little hurdles. One is that as we get older, we need fewer calories to maintain our weight. So when you were 30, you might have been able to eat, say, 2,500 calories to maintain your weight, and now you can only eat maybe 1,800 calories. But your protein requirement doesn't change. So that means you need to get more protein per calorie to meet your needs. And a second factor that comes into play with older adults, currently the RDA is not different for older adults. It's not higher, it's not lower. But in the future, it may be. There's emerging evidence that eating more protein helps older adults maintain their muscle mass. And the recommendations for this are to boost it from 0.8 grams per kilogram to 1 gram of protein per kilogram of body weight. So if we translated this to somebody who weighs 150 pounds, they'd now need about 75 grams of protein per day. Okay, so how do we get it? What are the problems? Why do people concern themselves with getting enough protein on a vegan diet? One of the issues is that plant products are not as concentrated sources of protein as animal products. So if you look in the bottom row, here's our 3 ounces of chicken at 25 grams of protein compared to a cup of black beans with only 15 grams of protein. So it's hard to find a plant protein that the same size serving is going to give you as much protein. But a lot of things have protein that we don't think about. You're not just getting protein from the beans. If you look here, you're getting protein from a baked potato. You're getting protein from spinach. And I didn't make this slide. I stole it from the internet. If I'd made it, I would have put grains up here. A cup of quinoa has 8 grams of protein. A cup of brown rice has 6 grams of protein. A slice of whole wheat bread has 4 grams of protein. All of that adds up. So even though we're not getting the most concentrated sources of protein, if you add it all up, you're getting enough protein. It may not be as high as with an animal-based diet, but it's going to be enough. The other factor that is of concern with plant-based diet is that the protein in plants is not as high quality as the protein in animals. Protein quality refers to the ability of our bodies to use the protein we eat to make the proteins we need in our bodies. So a good example of this is if you eat a steak, you're eating the muscle of a cow. Okay, we take that in, we break down the protein, which is made up of building blocks called amino acids, and then we use those amino acids to make our muscle. Well, our muscle looks just about like a cow muscle, so the combination of amino acids in that steak are just about identical to what we need. Black beans, not so much. So it's not a good match, but you can make it a good match by eating a variety of plant foods throughout the day. And this concept is referred to as protein complementation. So, and also I want to point out the exception to the rule that plant proteins are not as high quality as animal proteins is soy protein. Soy protein is as high quality as animal protein, as milk or beef or any other animal protein. Protein complementation refers to mixing the sources of plant proteins to increase the quality of the overall protein you're eating. And this concept came to public prominence in the 1970s with the book Diet for a Small Planet. Now, there was a whole book on this, but it's really simple. Basically, you eat legumes with just about anything else and you get a complete protein. So if you eat legumes with grains, you're good. If you eat legumes with nuts, you're good. If you eat legumes with seeds, you're good. Because legumes are deficient in one amino acid and all the other things are deficient in a different amino acid. So you mix them together, you get everything you need. And if you look at the combinations that this makes, you'll recognize these as being things that are common themes in various ethnic foods and traditional diets. So rice and beans is common in Mexican food. Rice and lentils is common in Indian food. Bread and peanut butter, an American creation. Peanuts are not a nut, they are a legume. Sesame seeds and chickpeas is what we find in hummus, a Middle Eastern dish. So many, many meals are made up of these combinations, but you do not need to eat these things in the same meal for them to give you the complementary protein that you need. So if we go back to amounts and quantity, just to give you sort of a sense of things, go back to our 3-ounce chicken breast with 25 grams of protein. If we take 3 ounces of tofu, which is high quality plant protein, it's going to give you about 10 grams of high quality protein. So in order to get 25 grams, you'd have to eat about half a block of tofu. So that's probably more than anyone wants in one serving. If we use protein complementation, a cup of 3/4 of a cup of black beans with a cup and a half of quinoa gives you 25 grams of protein. So again, you're not going to get as much all in one place as you do eating that chicken breast, but throughout the day, you're going to get plenty of protein to meet your needs. Can't say the same thing for vitamin B12. This is something you really need to watch out for if you're eating a strictly vegan diet. The slide I have here is giving some sample foods in various food groups. So at the bottom in orange, we have grains, green is vegetables, red is fruits, blue is dairy products, and purple is high protein foods. And you'll notice all the bars showing the B12 in foods are in animal products. This is because there is no B12 in plants. You can't get it from plants. The only way it appears in plants is if it's added through fortification or if it's a contaminant. So what should you do? If you're consuming a vegan diet, you have two choices: either take supplements or make sure you're including some fortified foods in your diet, foods that have vitamin B12 added to it. So this would be things like plant-based milks, breakfast cereals, nutritional yeast. Check the label. Vitamin B12 deficiencies take a long time to develop because it's a nutrient we kind of recycle very well, but they're not a good deficiency. It can cause anemia and it can cause permanent nerve damage, sometimes causing memory loss and symptoms that look like dementia. Another nutrient that we want to keep our eye on, but is in plant foods, is calcium. The reason we want to keep our eye on it is because most of the calcium in a typical North American diet comes from dairy products. So if you're cutting those out, you want to make sure you're getting good plant sources of calcium. I have the sardines up here. Fish in general is not a good source of calcium. Sardines are a good source because you eat the bones, and canned salmon is a good source because you eat the bones. But so let's look at our plant sources though. Leafy greens like kale and broccoli are good sources. Tofu is a great source because tofu is processed with calcium sulfate, and some of the calcium stays in the tofu. Legumes, so here we have garbanzo beans, are a good source. So again, you're going to get a little bit of calcium from a lot of different places in a vegetarian diet, but it's something that you should keep your eye on to make sure you're getting enough. If you're worried that you can't get enough from whole food sources, fortified foods are another good option. You can get orange juice with added calcium. Plant-based milks are often fortified with calcium. So again, if you're concerned, check the label. And again, you could take a supplement if you're really concerned. Another one, we know that calcium we need to maintain healthy bones. In order to absorb that calcium, we need vitamin D. We get vitamin D from two places. We can either make it in our skin when we're exposed to sunlight, or we can get it in our diet. But again, if you look at this graph, all the things that have vitamin D in it are animal products. Eggs, salmon, milk in the United States is fortified with vitamin D, and it's the primary source of dietary vitamin D for Americans. So if you're not consuming milk, you got to make sure you're getting your vitamin D someplace else. You may think, well, I'll just get it from the sun. In the summer, if you go out in the sun for about 10 or 15 minutes with your face and arms exposed, if you're light-skinned, you can get enough vitamin D. If you have darker skin pigmentation, it's going to take more exposure. If you put on sunscreen, wear a hat, and wear long sleeves before you go out because you're concerned about skin cancer, which is legitimate, you're not going to make any vitamin D. And then on top of that, we live in Connecticut. Connecticut's located at about 42 degrees north latitude. Anything above 40 degrees, even if you go out and sunbathe every day all winter, you can't get enough vitamin D between November and March because the angle of the sun is just too low. So up here, we certainly can't rely on sun exposure as a good source as a reliable source of vitamin D. So again, that goes back to taking supplements or making sure you're consuming foods that are fortified with vitamin D. A couple others that are less of an issue, but something, again, to keep an eye on. One of them is iron. The reason iron is a problem is because it's not absorbed as well from plant foods. So again, this isn't my slide, but it makes the point. There are two forms of iron in our diet. One is heme iron, which is part of a chemical complex called the heme group. So hemoglobin, the protein in our blood has a heme group. And we also have non-heme iron. Red meat contains both heme and non-heme iron. Plants only have non-heme. Heme iron is absorbed much better than non-heme iron. So if we take that out of the mix, we're not going to absorb it as well. And non-heme iron is also affected by things in plants like fiber, compounds called phytates and oxalates that inhibit iron absorption. So if you, ignoring the numbers on this slide because I like my numbers better, but if you look at what we call bioavailability, the amount of iron you can get from the food, get into your body and use from a mixed diet, one that includes animal products, is about 14 to 18%. In a vegan diet, it's more like 5 to 12%. So you're just not going to be able to absorb iron as well. Here is my bar graphs again, so you can look at some good plant sources of iron. So again, seeds, nuts, a decent source. Legumes are a good source of iron. And down here, your leafy greens, spinach, broccoli is okay. Looking down at the grains, you'll see that I have white bread and whole wheat bread here. Whole wheat bread is a natural source of iron. When you refine it and take away the bran and germ of the wheat kernel, you take away the iron, but iron is added back in fortification. In enrichment, they call it enrichment. So white bread is also a good source of iron. Not that I'm encouraging you to eat white bread, but I just want you to understand that some nutrients are added back to it, so it is a good source of certain nutrients. Another thing to keep in mind if you're worried about iron is you can increase the absorption of the iron in a meal by consuming it with vitamin C. So have some strawberries for dessert. It'll increase the amount of iron you absorb. Another way of getting more iron in a plant-based diet is to use cast iron cookware. If you cook in the iron cookware, some of the iron leaches into the food and increase the amount of iron in your diet. Zinc is another mineral that we don't absorb as well from plant foods. So similar sources, we get it from seeds. Legumes are a good source. Some greens. And if we go down here again to the grains, you'll notice that the whole wheat bread is a good source, but the white bread is not. Again, when they refine the flour, the zinc is lost, but that's not added back in the enrichment process. So if you're eating white grains, you're not getting any zinc. Only the whole grains are going to give you zinc. Okay, the last nutrient I want to talk about that could be at risk in a vegan diet are omega-3 fatty acids. And we usually think of fish when we think of omega-3 fatty acids. We think of EPA and DHA are the two what we call long chain omega-3 fatty acids. I'm going to put up a slide, and I apologize ahead of time because it's got way too much information. But the fatty acids that we are essential in our diet that we have to eat are omega-3s and omega-6s. The reason they're essential is we can't make them. Our bodies can't make them. We have to get them from our diet. The ones that are considered essential are alpha-linolenic acid, which has 18 carbons, and linoleic acid, which has 18 carbons. We can use these to synthesize, in the case of omega-3, the longer chain EPA and DHA. What these omega-3s and omega-6s are used for are to make regulatory molecules called eicosanoids. They're like hormones, and they help regulate important things in our body that are important to our health, like the level of inflammation, how well our blood clots, our blood pressure, and the effect of the eicosanoid depends on what it's made from. So if you make an eicosanoid from an omega-3 fatty acid, you get lower inflammation, you get lower blood clotting, you get lower blood pressure. So that sounds great. You say we should have all omega-3s, but too little inflammation and too low blood clotting and too low blood pressure isn't good either. So what we're trying to do is get a balance. So our inflammation level is good, so we can fight off diseases but not have chronic inflammation. So our blood clots when it should and not when it shouldn't. And so our blood pressure is normal. So we need the right ratio of these. In a diet that includes fish, you're getting EPA. In a vegan diet, you're getting primarily alpha-linolenic acid. And this conversion here is not great. We convert maybe 15%. So you need a whole lot of this to make as much as you're going to get from eating fish. But there are good sources. Flaxseed is a great source. Actually, I have, if we look at this chart, omega-3s are in green. So if we look at canola oil, it's got a decent amount of omega-3s. Salmon, this is going to be that EPA and DHA, the long chain. Walnuts are a good source, and flaxseed is a great source. So if this is where you're getting your omega-3s, you need to make sure you're getting plenty. There are a very few sources of EPA in a vegan diet, and that's algae and seaweed. So if you want to try and do it without taking any supplements or or not consuming larger amounts of these to get the EPA directly. Okay. If you make healthy choices within your vegan diet, it's going to help you meet all the needs for all these nutrients, with the exception of the few that you're going to have to rely on supplements like vitamin B12 and perhaps vitamin D. But just because there are no animal products doesn't mean you're eating a healthy dietary pattern. So, Fruit Loops with almond milk is a vegan breakfast. I apologize, we're going to pretend that's fake vegans, that's fake sausage and vegan cheese on the pizza with French fries and maybe a Coke for lunch. And then white pasta with marinara sauce and garlic bread and maybe some coconut milk ice cream for dessert. It's a vegan day, but I wouldn't give it any nutritional awards. So you have to remember that the overall recommendations for a healthy diet are going to apply to vegan diets as well. Now, these, I don't have every recommendation here, but we need to try and choose whole grains, avoid too much salt and added sugar, eat lots of fresh fruits and vegetables, choose more beans, and avoid highly processed foods. The whole highly processed foods, I want to take a deeper dive into that, because there are just as many vegan processed foods as non-vegan processed foods. A lot of snack foods don't have any animal products in them. And then there's a lot of specialty vegan foods that are highly processed. But the term processed is kind of a slippery slope. Whole wheat bread is processed. You have to take the wheat, grind it into flour, and bake it into bread. But whole wheat bread is less processed than white bread, which is less processed than cupcakes. So you've got to be a little bit rational with the way you think about processing. Some foods need processing to be eaten. You're not going to eat the wheat kernel, but so we have to bake the bread to make it, which involves some processing. Here, this photo just shows you some processed vegan foods and some whole unprocessed or much less processed foods. Tofu, which is shown here in tempeh, or processed, are processed foods made out of soy, which have been part of traditional diets for ages and are very healthy choices, even though they're processed. And throughout, earlier in the talk, I talked a lot about, I'm sorry, I've got a phone going, I got to stop it. Dave?
I can't turn it off.
Okay, all right. Okay, sorry, interruption.
It's all right.
Okay, I'm sorry for the interruption. I talked a lot about using fortified foods that contain vitamin B12 and vitamin D and calcium. There's nothing wrong with using those. The recommendation is the bulk of your diet be from unprocessed foods, and then add processing to add variety and flavor to your diet and to add the nutrients that might be at risk. You'll notice in here we have this Gardein product, which is sort of a fake chicken nugget kind of thing, and we've got Beyond Burger. So I thought I would take a little closer look at some of the fake meats, which I'm sure you're all interested in. These range from traditional veggie burgers to the Impossible Burger and Beyond Burger, these newer, highly processed products that resemble and taste like beef. If we look at the ingredients list on a traditional veggie burger, it's going to include things like carrots, onions, broccoli, kale, black beans, quinoa. It's processed, but it's made with some pretty healthy ingredients. They add some filler and spices and smush it together, and they're a pretty good choice. If you don't want to go with a processed product, there's lots of recipes. You can make your own bean burgers. Then the next level of this are things like your imitation sausages and chicken tenders, and that are made from texturized vegetable protein. There's also products made from mycoprotein, a fungal protein. This is Quorn, Quorn, that brand. Again, these are highly processed, so environmentally they do involve processing and packaging, but they're generally a fairly healthy choice. I wouldn't recommend eating them every meal every day, but again, to add variety to your diet, and they're generally good protein sources if you're worried about getting enough protein. So let's look then at the new generation of fake meats, the Beyond Burger and Impossible Burger. If you look at the marketing information for these things, they never promise to be healthier than beef. They only promise to be environmentally better than beef, and that they are. So in this table, what we're going to look at is the nutritional composition of a 4-ounce Impossible Burger, 4-ounce Beyond Burger, 4 ounces of 85% lean ground beef, and a black bean burger that's only 2.7 ounces. So calories, they're all just about identical. Fat, that's total fat, all identical, just about. Saturated fat, surprisingly, the Impossible Burger and Beyond Burger have as much or more saturated fat as the ground beef. Black bean burger has much less. Cholesterol, only animal products can contain cholesterol, so only the beef has that. Sodium, again, Impossible Burger and Beyond Burger have about 5 times as much sodium as beef. The black bean burger falls somewhere in between. Fiber, there is a little bit of fiber in the Impossible and Beyond Burger, none in the beef, but 8 grams in the black bean burger. And protein, these are great protein sources. They have the same amount of protein as beef and are high quality proteins. The Impossible Burger is soy, and there's a pea protein with Beyond Burger that's mixed with some other proteins. Black bean burger, about half as much. So if you love the taste and texture of these, use them in moderation. They're not necessarily that much healthier than beef, but if they add variety to your diet, they're going to be a good source of protein, and they help you to stick to a vegan diet. Go ahead and use them, but again, don't base your diet on them. I would not recommend going to Burger King and having a Impossible Whopper every day. They're going to take a large Impossible Burger patty, put it on a huge white bun, and add a lot of special sauce. So just for comparison, the 4-ounce Impossible Burger here has 240 calories. If you get an Impossible Whopper at Burger King, it has 630 calories. One thing that may be a question is, where is all this saturated fat coming from? The reason these foods are high in saturated fat is because they use coconut oil as their source of fat, and coconut oil is a saturated oil plant. I'm going to run back a couple slides. Oh, I guess I can't do that. Oh, there we go. Oh, that's the wrong way. It's not letting me go back. Oh, there we go. Okay, back to this graph. If we look at the purple bars, that's showing a saturated fat. So here we have roast beef, butter, cheddar cheese, coconut oil, more saturated fat than any of the animal fats. So coconut oil was promoted for a long time as sort of a healthy saturated fat. There was a lot of talk that it might help you lose weight or prevent weight gain. The reason for this is coconut oil contains what we call medium chain triglycerides. So these are basically fats with a little bit shorter length fatty acids than those we find in, say, canola or olive oil. Because of this, our body absorbs them differently and they're transported differently. So instead of being absorbed and going right to our adipose tissue or our fat, it's absorbed and goes to the liver. So they hypothesize that it's going to prevent you from gaining weight. In reality, there's no evidence that it does anything in terms of preventing or preventing weight gain or helping you lose weight. The other thing that was discussed with it is that it's better for your heart than other saturated fats. The reason for this is it's high in a fatty acid called lauric acid. And lauric acid, unlike other saturated fatty acids, increases your good cholesterol, your HDL, along with your bad cholesterol. So if you start here and they both go up, the idea is your risk stays the same, as opposed to most saturated fats where just the bad cholesterol goes up. But when they do studies and they look at cardiovascular risk factors in comparing butter, coconut oil, and olive oil, what they find is that the coconut oil falls in between. So it's better for you than butter, but nowhere near as good as olive oil. So my recommendation for this is, if you have a recipe that calls for coconut milk, go for it, use it. If you have a recipe that you need to saute something in coconut oil for the flavor, that's great. But don't start using it to butter your bread and throwing out your other oils and substituting coconut oil. Use it in moderation. The other thing I want to take a little closer look at are the plant-based milks. A lot of times if you shift to a vegan diet, you're going to want something to put on your cereal, something to put in your coffee or your tea. And so you're going to choose a plant-based milk. But what you should be careful of is what nutrients you're expecting to get from that plant-based milk. Milk is a great source of protein, calcium, vitamin D, vitamin A, and vitamin B12. All those things except the vitamin A are at risk of deficiency in a vegan diet. So we're no longer getting it from milk. So if we start looking at these plant-based milks, and there must be like 15 different plant-based milks these days. They're making it out of everything. Think about the nutrients you want. We discussed the fact that soy protein is the only animal protein that's as high a quality as only plant protein that is as high quality as animal proteins. And it turns out that soy milk that is fortified with calcium is the only milk substitute that's considered equivalent to milk by the USDA in its MyPlate website. If you think about the protein content of these things, so let's take rice milk, for example. Rice isn't a great source of protein. If you take rice and grind it up with water, you're not going to get any protein unless you add it from something else. So you think almond milk. Almond milk has done a fantastic marketing job of making everybody think it's this healthy, it's great healthy milk. But if you take almonds and grind them up and extrude off the liquid on top, you're keeping all the protein and most of the nutrients and the fiber behind. Almond milk, unless it's fortified with some other protein, has about 1 gram of protein in a cup. If you look at other nutrients, there's huge ranges here. That's because they're all different. Some of them are fortified with the nutrients we're concerned about with a vegan diet, and others aren't. If I'm using a plant-based milk, I want it to have calcium and vitamin B12 and vitamin D, because that's what I get from milk. And those are things that I'm looking for that I can't get from other sources. So if you are drinking milk, the government ensures that all milk is fortified with vitamin A and vitamin D. There's no regulations for plant-based milk. They can put anything they want or leave anything out. And most of these sources are not good. Most of the things plant-based milks are made out of are not good sources of calcium, vitamin B12, or vitamin D. So unless they're fortified, it's not going to be in there. So every type of milk is different, and even different soy milks and different rice milks and different hemp milks are going to be different. So if you're choosing these and you're looking for certain nutrients, make sure you read the label and find out what's actually in it. Okay, so in summary, if you want to choose a healthy vegan diet, you want to focus primarily on whole, unprocessed foods. Include some processed foods that are fortified with nutrients that might be at risk, and some that help you increase the variety and enjoyment in your diet. One way of putting your plate together is to go back to My Plate, which is not a bad tool. This is a traditional My Plate, but we can have a vegan My Plate too. Half your plate should be fruits and vegetables, a quarter of it whole grains. And that purple group that's high protein foods, don't choose animal products, choose legumes, choose nuts, choose seeds, which there wasn't enough room to write it on here. And if you want to, choose a plant-based milk instead of dairy products. Okay, anyone have any questions?
Lori, would you like to stop sharing and we will put this
Okay,
in gallery?
I will do that. I will do that. There we go.
First of all, we will get to question. I have one question and then I'll open it up to others. But I know we have people in our community that are concerned about the estrogen that they might get in soy products. What does the latest research know about soy? If you've had breast cancer or if you're a man, should you be concerned?
The estrogen in soy is not, it's a phytoestrogen. It's not human estrogen. It's from a phytochemical, and what we call an isoflavone, which so it's a phytoestrogen, which is much, much weaker in our bodies than a regular estrogen would be. And it can have different effects. It can sometimes block estrogen receptors and sometimes slightly stimulate estrogen receptors. So it can cause either a weak estrogenic effect or anti-estrogenic. So in animals, they did find that it stimulates breast cancer, but in humans, it's been found to either be protective or have no effect. So in other words, block the effects of estrogen. So there's no evidence that it causes or stimulates breast cancer. And it's so weak, it doesn't even eliminate menopausal symptoms in women. It has no effect in men. There have been men in Asia eating soy every day for decades and they don't grow breasts. So it's just not an estrogen that's going to have any effect in humans that's negative.
Terrific. And we have a question in the chat. What can be used in place of Crisco in baking?
I'm not a food scientist, I'm a nutritionist. Crisco.
Is that where your coconut oil would?
Well, I mean, your Crisco is probably better than coconut oil if you want to know the truth. You can also use margarine.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the Crisco has no trans fat anymore. That's been taken out of the food supply. And, and very little saturated fat.
Okay, other questions? Dan, go ahead.
Not a question, just a compliment. An incredibly balanced, practical talk about a vastly complex subject. And at Kathleen's urgings, Carla and I have shifted away from milk to soy milk, and no effect on our pleasure in our food or anything like that. It's an easy thing to do. But that was a fantastic talk, Lori.
Thank you. I was hoping I didn't go too light or too heavy in places.
It was really perfect. And Claire, do you have a question?
Let me unmute myself. Yes, thank you very much for that, Lori, because it was very complete for a lot of things, but it is, as I'm listening to it, and in fact, you know, this is something that I study as well and teach as well. I can see why my patients are as baffled and as confused. As I'm listening to your talk, I'm thinking, oh my God, I mean, actually I've studied it and I know what I take, but I'm thinking they're going from saying I could eat 2 things of chicken and get everything I need and a piece of fish a week. And then now Dr. Warren's asking me to do all this crazy stuff and take these supplements. But what I think is important for people to understand is the standard American diet is associated with plaque formation, inflammation, all of the processed foods. It's not just one thing. It's not just one protein or one particular thing that's causing all of the things that are causing the inflammation and the arteriosclerotic effects and the insulin resistance because of the fat cells in our body. There's so many things going on, and that in fact, Lori's description of a plant healthy lifestyle is absolutely essential to prevent the diseases of the standard American diet that is epidemic. So clearly something has happened from, you know, eating 2 low fat chicken breasts a day, which is what a lot of people are eating. A lot of saturated fat in all of those things. And the other thing is, I know what I do and I know what I take as supplements, and I'm not going to get complicated with but it's really, it does get mind-boggling. And I try to make it simple when I'm talking to my patients. I'm saying, those palm oils, those tropical oils are going to, they have saturated fat, and that's what's in all of many of the vegan junk foods that people like to eat because that's what your palate is used to. So as you are saying, and I say to my patients, is you're retraining your palate. You're also retraining your gut biome by increasing hugely the amount of fiber that you're feeding the bacteria in your gut. There's so much more than just a simple food. It's a whole organism. And the simple food understanding, it's mind-boggling. And you made it as clear as one could, but even I am shaking my head.
Well, you know, it's complicated when you go through and say, oh, you're at risk of deficiency for this and this and this. But if you're choosing the healthy foods, you're okay with just about everything except B12 and vitamin D.
Thank you.
Okay. So like I said, those are the 2 that are most at risk. The others are going to come if you're eating beans, fresh fruits, vegetables, whole grains. So
thank you.
I think the healthy vegan, I think the healthy vegan plate makes it a lot more simple too. I think that was a very visual. Bruce, did you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question. What are the Radins having for dinner?
They're vegan, well, Larry.
Because I see them eating during our presentation. I was just curious what they're eating while this wonderful talk is going on.
Unprocessed vegan meal. Highly unprocessed.
Okay, thank you.
I have chicken and it's good.
All right, good. Okay. That's all I wanted to know.
Can I ask you a question? So I've been a vegan 8 years, and I was curious, you started your talk with the premise that vegan diet is healthy and what we should all follow. Just curious what your take, why it is that? Why do you think that?
well, I'm not saying everyone should follow a vegan diet. I'm saying diets should be flexible, and everyone should reduce the amounts of animal products in their diet and increase the amounts of plants. If a vegan diet is not something you want, just eat a lot less meat and less, more fish, less beef, chicken, but less animal products is the key. If you want to go to a vegan diet, that's great. And that's what I focused my talk on, because that's the more difficult diet to follow and make sure you meet your nutrient needs. If you're eating some animal products, you don't have to worry about vitamin B12, you're going to get it. So,
Yeah, I think the message is getting out there because, so I'm a physician. I do talk to patients a lot about nutrition. I really do. And whenever I ask, how is your diet? Just kind of like that, I get almost always the same answer. Can you guess what they say?
it could be better.
They say,
I don't,
I eat very little meat.
okay.
Oh, like they're guilty. They feel guilty because they're hearing this, I guess, in the media that, you know, meat is maybe not good for you. So I think it is getting out there. And I think the number of people who are adopting it has been slowly increasing over time. I don't know if you have any figures on that. I think.
Yeah, I don't have any statistics, but I think the message is getting out, but there's a vast portion of Americans that don't want to be told what to eat. Even if they know it's healthier for them, they're not going to do it. So.
Ramana, I think she's got a hand.
So I just want to echo what Dan said. I'm a physician as well, and I thought your presentation was really excellent. Can you talk about the advantage of vegan over a diet that includes fish? Because that's what I don't see. I don't see the advantage of vegan over fish.
I don't think there is much advantage. I'm a vegan that eats fish.
Okay, so I just wanted to make sure that was clear. Okay.
Yeah, again, it eliminates a lot of, it eliminates the issue of omega-3s. It eliminates the vitamin B12. It's adding another high quality protein source. So no, I don't see any advantage.
And it gives variety.
And it gives variety, right? So, like I said, my feeling is diets should be flexible.
And lowers your cholesterol a lot. There's no comparison to being a vegetarian and being a vegan. My numbers were still high as a vegetarian. As soon as I switched to being a vegan, they plummeted.
Well, yes, were you eating cheese as a vegetarian?
Not a lot, and only a splash of milk in coffee, and really not a lot. But whatever it was, it made the difference.
Well, what is the difference in your diet now?
No animal products at all. I was eating some eggs. I was eating some cheese. Occasional milk and coffee, not a lot. I do eat occasional fish, but my numbers went back down to normal, and they were quite high.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's getting people to do it. If you tell them it's gonna, they can get their numbers down without medication.
Except a lot of people have normal cholesterol or low cholesterol and high, so they don't need that, right? I mean, if you have a normal cholesterol and your good cholesterol is high, then you don't really need to worry about lowering your cholesterol.
Right.
So we had one other question in the chat here. Any comments on the goodness of buckwheat?
Not really. It counts as like a whole grain, even though it's it's not a wheat. But no, I mean it's a healthy grain. I don't know the nutritional composition different from other whole grains. So.
Okay.
No, it's not great.
Yeah. So I once had a cardiologist who said, when I asked him about a vegan diet, he said he would rather die 2 years earlier. Sorry, but that was many years ago. And I know he was joking. But I am like one of those people who, like others, have greatly reduced their intake of animal products, but still can't like really kick it completely. So I wonder if you can give us some guidance on stratified. I mean, obviously most of us think, well, if red meat is terrible, so you don't eat red meat, but many people will eat like a little chicken breast, will eat fish and occasional cheese, but smaller portions. Do you have any feeling or guidance? You have any guidance about
Again, I be flexible, minimize, if you need it sometimes to add that variety and pleasure to your diet, but try and minimize it. Particularly the cheese. A little chicken is probably less damaged than cheese, which is so high in saturated fat.
Mm.
Okay.
Other questions?
Cheese.
Yeah, throw it out.
Yeah.
Well, that was absolutely fascinating, Lori. And one thing I learned was about coconut oil. I would say about 7 or 8 years ago when I first became a vegan, I was reading all this stuff on how healthy coconut oil is. And so you explained that very well as to why the thinking has changed on coconut oil. So I really appreciate that. I think I might toss coconut oil that I have.
Well, like I said, there are a couple recipes that it really adds some flavor. So, you have those occasionally. So.
Yeah. And Claire, do you have another question?
Yeah, Lori, what do you are a pescatarian, you eat fish occasionally?
Right, yes.
So you don't have to take any omega, DHA,
No.
EPA supplements. So what do you take?
The only thing I take is vitamin D.
And
I don't need B12 or anything because I use soy milk that's fortified with it. Plus I eat fish, so.
Okay. And how much vitamin D do you take?
I think it's 2,000 international units. I'm not, it may not be.
No, that's usually what I recommend. Do you recommend, or do you have, or have you had your vitamin D checked at any time in your?
I have, and it was low, and that's when I started taking supplements.
Yeah. I noticed that when I started checking people's vitamin D, I was just amazingly surprised at how low it was.
Well, again, it's because of
sunblock.
the fear of skin cancer. If you put, you never go out without sunscreen, you don't get any vitamin D from the sun.
Yeah. That vitamin D is quite the amazing hormone, isn't it?
Yep. We need it.
We need it. Bones, and we don't even know what else. So that was great. You really nailed it with your charts. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think this might be the first PowerPoint presentation we've had in a year.
Oh, really?
And, I was surprised that you wanted to do one, but now that I've seen it, it actually made things so simple to be able to visualize what you were talking about. So thank you for doing that. I know it was a lot of work to put it together, but thank you. It was really terrific.
I actually took some screenshots of those PowerPoint slides so I can remember.
Oh, good. Yeah. I want to see them.
Well, once again, thank you for joining us, Lori. It was really wonderful.
Okay, it was fun. It was fun. Nice meeting
Thank
everybody.
Nice seeing you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Seeing everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.